So I think the question really is, what does Beijing do next after all these threats that have been, leading up right until today as well? And there were further instances of interference that took place today by China, and experts have said that they don't think that there's going to be anything that happens in the immediate aftermath of this vote, and they expect that perhaps that there will be some sort of drills that take place in March. Part of the reason for that is that Beijing doesn't necessarily want to rock relations with the US right now, and partly because of conditions in March as well, sea conditions I'm talking about, and it's perhaps likely to stage some sort of live drills also in May during the presidential inauguration. But one of the things that's interesting that people are talking about is former President and KMT leader Ma Ying-jeou. Yesterday, he said publicly that
with the countdown to the Iowa caucuses. There's a deadline looming for hundreds of thousands of small businesses in this country. On January 18th, repayment is due on pandemic-era loans up to $60,000 offered by the federal government. Many businesses wanted an extension, but as the host of the House, Catherine Cullen, reports, the minister in charge says that won't happen.
Sometimes it feels like small businesses in front of a firing squad, and which governmental department agency is going to take a shot at you.
Angela O'Brien needed the government's help during the pandemic. She owns Esteem Lingerie in West Kelowna, BC, and when business screeched to a halt, she applied for a government loan known as CEBA, the Canada Emergency Business Account. Next week is a key deadline. Businesses who pay back all the money will get up to $20,000 of their loan forgiven. Those who don't start racking up interest. O'Brien says she jumped through hoops to pay the money back, refinancing her loan and putting it on a line of...
And then I would sleep, wake up, work out, do whatever, and then I would go to hockey practice at 8 p.m. in Toronto. So definitely you got to put your time management skills to work, and I guess it worked out for me. So
now she's paid for doing what she loves, and she has free time in the evening for the first time in years.
It's hard for me to sit still.
Despite the New York team, the team practices and plays in Connecticut. That's the main history when she scored in the league's first ever game in Toronto on New Year's Day.
The loudness in the rink was crazy. It was just looking around and I'm
bulk buy Canadian drugs. Some worry it would lead to shortages here. Why are they looking to us to lower their drug prices? But first, Canada could take in up to 1,000 people fleeing Gaza, but they'll need to list everything from their employment history to their scars and TikTok accounts. The immigration minister joins us to explain. The House is now in session. Palestinian Canadians desperate to get family out of Gaza got a glimmer of hope this week. The government launched a program that will let Canadians bring relatives here from Gaza on a temporary basis. The process requires an extraordinary amount of information. Jihan Kunu lives in Ottawa and has been filling out applications for several family members.
What I'm urging the government to treat our families like others, just in the legislative fairness. If someone in our family in Gaza right now looking for basic necessities, for food, for water, living in a tent, I feel embarrassed calling them or texting them, asking them to give me their name of supervisor or their social media account for them and their families. I feel they will feel like I'm not feeling what they are going through right now.
And getting out of Gaza is not guaranteed. Mark Miller is Canada's immigration minister. Welcome back to the House.
Thank you for having me on, Kevin.
Minister, very few countries are trying to do this, and it's been difficult just getting Canadian citizens out of Gaza. What makes you believe it's possible to get 1,000 people out?
Well, first, I have hope. And I think in this situation, we're going to turn to as human, when I served around the country, where my citizens expect me to do my best to get people out of the war zone, particularly when they have connections to Canada. We have to try. I can't guarantee we'll get people out. We've had a very frustrating time just getting Canadians out and permanent residents out in the last 3 weeks in circumstances where we don't control the comings and goings of people throughout the case where people are mostly congregated to get out. But we have to try, and this is something that we need to do because of who we are as a country, and because there are people whose lives are at risk in a humanitarian disaster. That comes with a lot of complications. One, first, making sure we know who these people are. They are not Canadians, but they have extended family connections to Canadians, so we need to do some rigorous background work on them. This isn't the first time we've done this. We've, for example, used this type of information that we're requesting from people from Afghanistan.
I'd love to jump in there, Minister, because we heard about that a moment ago from a woman who's trying to bring family here. You say you've used this process before. I've seen it referred to as unprecedented elsewhere. When you ask somebody, for instance, to catalog their injuries and scars and how they got them, why does the government of Canada need to know that?
Well, first, we absolutely need to understand someone's history, particularly when they're not Canadian, when they are not permanent residents. I understand how onerous this can be, particularly working in an environment where people's lives are at risk, but we do have to take security precautions. This is a process that we've gone through, for example, in Afghanistan, to the best of my knowledge, and we need to make sure that we have the proper security protocols and screenings being done on people. The challenge of the situation, Catherine, is such is that we can't go into Gaza to do biometrics and to do the screenings there, so we have to have certain assurances about people before we can actually get them through Rafah, which goes through its own set of screenings by Israeli authorities, Egyptian authorities, and even a terrorist organization in Hamas, to then proceed to a third country in Egypt, where we do a second round of screenings and biometrics. So we need to know who we're dealing with, and that is not necessarily certain all the time. Again, as a humanitarian, I want to get these people out as quickly as possible, but we can't compromise security, and that is just the reality of the situation. Once we get a sense of who these people are and how to do these checks, hopefully as quickly as possible, we'll get them out and hopefully get them to safety.
Some of these detailed standards, I take your point about using
improve it, willing to be flexible on a humanitarian basis, given the facts on the ground and the flexibility that some of our officers will have to make on-site determinations, risk-based profile based on the age of the individual and their own judgment. But again, both security and the exigency of getting people out as quickly as possible are top of mind.
I take your point that you don't control it. Would you say, though, that it is reasonable to ask someone who is living in a refugee camp, struggling to find food, against disease, irregular access to communications, to ask them, for example, who their employer was when they were 17 years old?
Look, between you and I, litigating these publicly is probably not something that will yield a consensus on either side. But I think we need to know this information to make sure we know who we are getting. Do we need to be flexible in certain circumstances? I think we do, just because of the situation on the ground. But again, it's very difficult to compromise the security of Canadians, and we need to know who we're getting out, particularly when we have had no contact as a country with them.
And there will be some Canadians who will wonder about that question of security. So what would you say to them, given that this is a place where Hamas is active, the Canadian government has listed them as a terrorist group? What would you say to Canadians about the risk?
Well, I don't think you need to speculate, Catherine. You just need to look at my social media feed to the extent that's indicative of anything in society. People are outraged at the fact that we are potentially bringing out 1,000 quote-unquote terrorists. That is not the case, but that sentiment is there, and it's virulent, and it's the result of how emotionally charged this particular war is, even as compared to others. We need to kind of take a look at that and see it for what it is, and also be able to make our own security determinations as to people. When you talk about people coming to Canada, it is not a right. But when it comes to people that are fleeing war, we have a duty to act, and we've done so with respect to the people that are Canadians and permanent residents. But now, as human beings, we need to extend our arms to those that have close family connections, to those that are trying to flee the war. We are the only country, to my knowledge, that are doing this in such an extensive way. And in that sense, I think we can be quite proud of it.
I want to ask you about another aspect of your file as well, a story by the Canadian Press this week, citing documents that show the civil service warned immigration levels were outstripping the housing supply and were linked to unaffordability. In hindsight, do you think the government should have done a better job listening to those warnings?
Well, let's not assume that we didn't, and I'm not betraying cabinet confidence by saying that every time we discuss immigration levels, there are very robust conversations in various directions and with various points of views around the cabinet table. And housing, obviously, is a consideration that we have been considering and analyzing and investing in as a government since 2015. The housing plan we put forward at the outset was one that the federal government hadn't been doing in 30 years.
Sorry, Minister, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying there when you say let's not assume that we didn't. I mean, your immigration targets are ambitious, right? They're 500,000. You're suggesting that if it weren't for the constraints around housing, they would have been even higher than that?
Well, look, I think we have different views around the table as to whether there are lower targets needed, stabilizing the levels, or even going more ambitious. You only need to listen to the Bank of Canada to hear the work that we've been doing and the incredible work we've been doing in making the workforce younger. That comes with the conundrum, which is one around the supply of houses, magnified by the affordability challenge that the hike in interest rates has caused Canadians and the angst people feel every couple weeks or month when they have to pay their mortgage payments. People are very worried about being able to make ends meet, and we need to be focused on that. It isn't immigrants that caused the increase in the mortgage rates, but clearly volume is volume. Economists analyze volumes, but I have a challenge as the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship in dealing with something that is looming even heavier over our heads, which is the demographic curve, which is not trending in any country that is similarly situated very positively. But Canada, and you don't need to listen to me, the Bank of Canada said as much, we've done a singularly good job in reducing that and making the workforce younger. It has been attributable almost 100% to immigration. That is coming down and supply challenges that we are addressing and are making significant investments. But it is complex, and it doesn't come with one easy solution or a slogan or any sort of easy fix. It does come with investments and also pushing provinces and cities to do their parts. And you see my colleague Sean Fraser doing that on a day-by-day basis.
Before I let you go,
houses more affordable. It doesn't come with giving a house to every person that comes in the country. I would like to see what Mr. Poilievre's actual concrete plan is. We have made historic investments in housing as the federal government, but again, this is a problem that grew out of the 1990s. Regardless of the federal government in place, so we have our own responsibility as a party to assume on that. But make no mistake, the government has invested. Could we do it better, more efficiently? I think you've seen that rolling out in the last little while. But clearly, the federal government has a role to play in addressing the supply side of housing, and it needs to do it in a fashion that it hasn't done up to now, which is in a more efficient, effective, and with more money on the table.
Thank you very much for your time today, Minister.
Thank you, Catherine.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller. You heard us discussing the temporary resident pathway for Gazans with family in Canada, but asylum seekers already in Canada know that bringing family here can take a
dream, Rags to riches story. And that's not the case. Running a small business in Canada, trying to keep up with provincial government changes, federal government changes, not to mention providing your service and what you're there to actually do and make revenue. And it almost feels like we're the ones being preyed upon. You know, it's one of these things that we've really got to look at with all levels of government. How many kings are we accountable to?
We only have a moment left, but we are going to speak to the Minister for Small Business, the federal minister, in a moment. I'd like to know what both of you would like her to know, the one takeaway you'd like to express to her, Sarah, and I'll start with you.
We're so much more than data. And, you know, life always has exceptions. There's no talking point, there's no script, there's no straightforward. And I feel like it's like that in all fields, right?
That's a plea for more flexibility from the government then?
I don't know what it is. I can't even tell you. I think it's like a plea for humanization.
Like human decency.
Yeah. And I feel that with the digitalization of everything, it's like it's making it a lot easy to just, you know.
Angela, what would your message be?
So mine is a little more hardcore. I would love to see, and I think back to the British series on TV called Yes, Prime Minister, and I remember there was a line where the head civil servant was speaking to the Prime Minister, and he looked him in the eye and said, with all due respect, politicians come and go, civil servants last forever. I really feel that if the government wants to help small business, they need to start refining and reorganizing the civil service that deals with small business to run more efficiently and effectively, like small businesses have to.
I really appreciate you both taking the time to tell us your stories today. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for getting this out there, Catherine. Really appreciate it. And my heart goes out to you, hon. Good luck to you, and please do not let this take you to the mat. You know what? Sometimes we get knocked down so we can come out to a much higher level, and I really hope that for you.
Thank you so much, Angela. Have a beautiful day.
That was Angela O'Brien of Esteem Lingerie in West Kelowna, and Sarah Ann Mayette, the former owner of Café Sucré in Castleman, Ontario. So what is the government's response to the concerns raised by small business owners? Richie Valdez is the Federal Minister of Small Business. Welcome to the House.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Now, a lot of businesses have been holding out hope that there was going to be an extension on